this Shabbat, my 10-year-old, I hope you can see this, was holding, it's called Otiyot. This is a Shabbat paper for kids. And he was very, very excited, and he came up to me and said, "Mom, they found Vashti's tail. Her it's 2,400 years old, and they're still looking for her horns." And he was so sure this is real news. And we told him this is a Purim paper, and it's probably a joke. So in my lecture today, I would like to shed light on the character of Queen Vashti and the role that she plays in the Book of Esther, and we will examine the way in which she is presented in different ways in the Babylonian Talmud and compare it to the Midrashim composed in the land of Israel. So let's see if I can, okay, I'll show my screen. I'll share the screen, please. So Vashti's role in Megillat Esther is short and ends with the first chapter of the book. She is presented as a high-ranking woman who holds a banquet of her own for the women. Vashti disobeys the drunken king Achashverosh when he summons her to appear at his banquet with her royal crown upon her head, so that he can show her off and show off her beauty. But by disobeying the king's order, she insults him in front of all his company, and she is punished by being banished from the palace and from the story. So Vashti is a secondary character in the Book of Esther who has to clear the way so that the main character, Esther, can appear on the stage. The cruel and hasty behavior of Achashverosh towards Vashti can explain a few things and explain us things in the story. For example, why is Esther afraid to enter the king's inner court without having been summoned? Or another thing it can explain is Achashverosh's hasty decision to kill Haman. So in rabbinic literature, Vashti is presented in various outfits, and her character is disguised differently by Babylonian sources and Israeli sources. I will show different pictures during my lecture, although we'll go straight ahead to the Midrashim themselves. But I just wanted to say that all the pictures in my lecture are taken from an exhibition about Vashti that was shown exhibited in Neve Schechter a few years ago. Shira Friedman was the curator. And this beautiful picture in the Megillah by Fiona Benjamin. And we can see here King Achashverosh, and here Vashti is dancing in front of him. And we can see her here again. Let me see if I can enlarge this a little bit. We can see her again here naked, and this will connect immediately to the Babylonian Talmud, as we shall see. So let's start with Vashti as seen by the Babylonian rabbis. And let's see. Okay. So the Babylonian rabbis tend to cast Vashti in an extremely negative light, as wicked, a Jew hater, and a wanton. And we'll see this exactly, we'll start here in the first text. So I'm reading from the Babylonian Talmud in Megillah 12a and b. Also Vashti the queen made a feast for the women in the royal house, which belonged to King Achashverosh. Now the Gemara asks, why did she hold the feast in the royal house, a place of men, rather than in the women's house, where it should have been? And Rava, one of the rabbis, said in response, the two of them had sinful intentions. As people say, he with pumpkins and his wife with zucchinis. So according to the Babylonian Talmud, Vashti was a wanton adulteress, and her husband, and they ask, why did she hold the royal feast in the royal house? Meaning, why did she have her banquet next to Achashverosh's banquet? And they say that the man and wife are similar. Often a man and his wife are engaged in similar actions, meaning that Achashverosh himself wanted to bring women to his banquet, as we see in the chapter, in the biblical chapter. And also Vashti had the same intentions. She wanted to bring men to the women's banquet. And that's why they call them pumpkin and zucchini, meaning these are vegetables from the same kind. And this can teach us that they were thought similarly. Now, if this brings up a problem, yes, depicting Vashti in this way leads us to ask why, if this was the case, did she refuse to appear at the men's feast, as we read in the Megillah? She refuses to come. So if she had the same intentions, she should have just picked up her dress and run to Achashverosh's banquet, because this is exactly what she wanted as well. So why did she refuse? And this appears also in the Babylonian Talmud, and I'm reading the second text. But the Queen Vashti refused to come, since she was immodest, as the rabbi said above, and they quote, the two of them had sinful intentions. What is the reason that she did not come? Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina said, this teaches that she broke out in leprosy. And an alternative reason was taught in the Braita. The angel Gabriel came and fashioned her a tail. So these rabbis maintain that Vashti actually wanted to appear at the Achashverosh's party. Her plans were upset when leprosy erupted over her entire body, so that she could not make an appearance before all her guests. According to another tradition, Angel Gabriel came and fixed a tail to her. So God intervenes in various ways in order to prevent Vashti from heeding Achashverosh. Thus, he directed matters so that Vashti would reign in her place. So it's very interesting to see how things are. This tale turns Vashti in a kind of an animal, and also leprosy, meaning she herself wanted to go to Achashverosh's feast, but God here intervenes in order to block her way, and she must say no in order that Esther will come and take her place. So this is very important that this should happen, and they roll the things in a way that this should happen. Now, I brought here again an artwork by Jacqueline Nichols, and it was also presented at the exhibition at the Schechter. And here we can see Vashti as she drew after this text of the Babylonian Talmud. And we can see her here really as kind of an animal. We can see her tail, we can see the horn. And let me see, someone is writing something in the chat. And Joyce is writing here that Vashti is a real feminist, very strong woman. I surely agree. And we will try and understand why did the rabbis in the Babylonian Talmud present her in such a way as a kind of a demon, as we can also see in this illustration. So we move on to two more texts in the Babylonian Talmud. And we'll see again that the collection of Midrashim here present Vashti in a very, very negative light. The adverse attitude of the rabbis might be a result of the fact that Vashti was Babylonian. And this is what we read here in text number 3. On the 7th day when the heart of the king was merry with wine. This is a citation from Esther. Is that to say that until now his heart was not merry with wine? What took him 7 days to be merry with wine? Is not enough just a few cups of wine? And why does it take 7 days? But Rava said, the 7th day was Shabbat, when the difference between the Jewish people and the Gentiles is most apparent. On Shabbat, when the Jewish people eat and drink, they begin by occupying themselves with words of Torah and words of praise of God. But the nations of the world, when they eat and drink, they begin only with words of listen. Okay. So too, the feast of that wicked man, Achashverosh, when the men began to converse, some said, the Median women are the most beautiful, while others said, the Persian women are the most beautiful. Achashverosh said to them, the vessel that I use, meaning my wife, is neither Median nor Persian, but rather Chaldean. Do you wish to see her? They said to him, yes, provide that she be naked. And this is connected to the verse that says to bring her with a crown, Schechter Malchut, meaning only with a crown and with nothing else on her body. And they continue by saying that Vashti was punished in the same way, measure by measure. Vashti was punished in this humiliating way, for it was with a measure that man measures to others that he himself is measured. This teaches that wicked Vashti, would take the daughters of Israel and strip them naked and make them work on Shabbat. Therefore, it was decreed that she was brought before the king naked on Shabbat. This is as it is written, after these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus was appeased, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what was decreed against her. This is to say, just as she had done with the young Jewish women, so it was decreed upon her. So, in view of the Babylonian rabbis, Vashti's punishment was merited midah keneged midah, measure for measure, as she did to the Jewish woman. So it was decreed against her. And the wicked Vashti would bring Jewish women, strip them naked, and order them to perform work on the Shabbat. Consequently, she was punished by being commanded to appear in the nude at the banquet of Ahasuerus on a Shabbat day. So this is really very hard to understand. And why do the Babylonian rabbis present Vashti in such a negative way? Some people today see her as the first feminist and such excitingly saying no to a king and standing on her own idea and beliefs. So why do they see her in this negative way? And I think that the reason for this is that Vashti is depicted here as a Chaldean or a Babylonian, and for the rabbis, she represents the local Babylonian women. And they wanted to emphasize their negative traits, the negative traits of these women. Probably this wanted, they tried to erect barriers between Jews living in Babylonia and these local Gentile women. So I think that this way to show her so negatively is actually trying to defend themselves and to create these barriers between them and the local women in Babylonia, reminding you again that these rabbis lived in Babylonia, and this is the way they wanted to depict Vashti. So let me show you again Here I have another piece of art from the exhibition about Vashti by Andy Arnovitz. Maybe some of you know him. And he calls his work Vashti's Revenge. And we can see her here in the middle of this piece of artwork. And we see she is the woman that is in the middle of this cycle, and everything is turning around her. She is now in the center, and we can see Achashverosh here, his head down and his legs up, and she got her revenge by being the one who is moving everything in this story. So I'm moving on now to Vashti as seen by the rabbis of Eretz Israel, and here we can see a very, very different picture. So this, in contrast to the negative depiction of Vashti in the Babylonian rabbis, their counterparts in Eretz Israel portrayed her in a positive manner. And let's read here from Midrash Esther Rabbah. But Queen Vashti refused. Okay. She sent and said to him, to Achashverosh, words that touched his heart. She said to him, if they see that I am beautiful, they will try to make use of me and kill you. But if they see that I am ugly, you will be disgraced because of me. She hinted to him, but he did not take the hint. She was pricked, but he was not pricked. She sent and said to him, you were the stable master of my father's house, and you were experienced in leading before yourself prostitutes naked. Now that you have come into kingship, you have not changed from your bad behavior. She hinted to him, but he did not take her hint. She was pricking him, but he was not pricked. She sent and said to him, the one found guilty in court of my father's house was not judged naked. So Vashti was of royal dynasty and deported herself with proper honor and nobility. And the Midrash relates that when Achashverosh sent his important ministers to bring Vashti, she sent back to him 3 times in an attempt to pursue him, to withdraw his demand. And she's showed as blessed with wisdom. She cleverly seeks different ways by which to pursue the Achashverosh to withdraw his request. First, she appeals to logic by setting forth all the possible scenarios that might result from his demand, all of which are to his disadvantage. Then she addresses his sense of honor and self-respect, demanding that he act as fitting for a king. And finally, she appeals to his compassion and asks that he not insist upon her appearing naked before all his guests. By means of her messengers, Vashti hints to her husband that he does not consider the consequences of his actions and that he wields to Schechter only because of his marriage to her. Accordingly, it is not appropriate that he ordered her to do something against her will. The reader sees Achashverosh in contrast with Vashti, as a ruler who acts rashly and does not think even one single step ahead. The hints that his wife sends Achashverosh merely bounce off the thick-skinned king. Even in his palace, his behavior is inappropriate, and he continues to act in a disgraceful manner, like a steward. If we move on, we can see, I see there, someone wrote something in the chat, so thank you. As I move on to text number 2, also in Midrash Esther Rabbah. And despite the positive depictions of Vashti by the Eretz Israel rabbis, they find also a flaw in her, and for which she is punished by God and is deposed. So sometime afterwards, when the anger of the king Ahasuerus subsided, he remembered Vashti. What did he remember? That decree which he had decreed upon her, that she come naked before him, and that she did not come, and that he was angry and killed her. After he did this, he had regrets. Why? What she had done was appropriate, and what was decreed against her was improper. And why did it happen to her thus? Why did it happen? All this, why was she expelled from the palace? Or why did all this happen to her? Because she did not release Ahasuerus to begin the rebuilding of the temple. And she said to him, "What my fathers destroyed, you seek to rebuild?" So the rabbis, the Eretz Israeli rabbis, assert that Ahasuerus wanted to rebuild the temple. But Vashti stayed his hand, and she told him, "You wish to rebuild what my forefathers destroyed?" She was therefore punished by the loss of her crown. So for the rabbis of Eretz Israel, Vashti apparently represents the Babylonian rule that laid waste to the temple. So in conclusion, if I want to summarize, we see that Vashti appears in various guises in rabbinic literature. By using her character, the rabbis wanted to convey a message and educate their people. The rabbis in Babylonia wanted to erect barriers between the Jews living in Babylonia and the local Gentile women. The rabbis of Eretz Israel used Vashti's character differently. For them, she was the descendant of Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian ruler who laid waste to the temple. Vashti's replacement by Esther symbolizes the reversal that occurs in the Book of Esther, and the hope that the destroyer of the temple would receive the punishment while the people of Israel would return to its former glory. Thank you very much.
Toda rabba, Tamar. We have time for one question or comment about these Midrashim about Vashti or the artwork.
I want to show one more piece of art here. And we see Avi Biran, the bells of Vashti and Esther, and here we can see this beautiful work. Here it says Esther and Vashti, and we see the royal crown, which is actually bells, and a kind of pot for making cakes. And this presents the question, what are these women, and what is their role in the Megillah?
Yafet. Well, any more questions or comments?
I have another question.
Yes, Moisey. You like to ask questions. Good.
My name is pronounced Moise. That's Moses in French. Right. To me, both presentations really raise the question about the authorship of the Megillah, because you beautifully demonstrated how articulate that everything in minutiae and planned and so on, and all the underlying messages. So it suggests that it was a collegial writing over a certain time, as opposed to the story that was passed by Mordechai. And I was just curious, how do you guys look at this issue?
Well, unfortunately, Dr. Schwartz had to go teach another class, so we can't ask Dr. Schwartz. Tamar, yesh lach de'ah?
So it's interesting how these Midrashim bring God into the picture, because God is missing in this Megillah, and they just push him in by these angels and by planning everything ahead. So this is a concept that the rabbis want to bring God into the Megillah. And I think that their main aim was not really to suggest what Vashti looked like or what was her costume, but really to educate their people. So they have their own agendas.
Thank you.
Thank you.